Yeah. So yeah, we're recording now, and yeah, so that's for the purposes of me transcribing the later to an actual text, and we'll see what happens with the video itself. It's if it's good quality, we'll see if we can upload it as well.
Yeah, that's fine by me.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so let's get going. Just first question is going to be about what is the band doing at this moment? What have you been up to? I'm aware that you have a number of live appearances going on, and there is a tour coming up, which, to my discontent, is not passing through Manchester, so I can't. I can't end, but that's fine. So yeah, if you just tell us a little bit about the any future live performances in this.
Yeah, so the year started with the release of an album that I'd been working on for like 4 or 5 years. So it was sort of delayed throughout COVID, just because we couldn't record properly. So it was great to finally get that out. And then we had like the album launch show in Manchester with quite a lot of fellow bands that are on the Reaper Agency roster. There was a lot of album release, like debuts at that event, so it was cool to be part of that, releasing alongside a lot of other great bands. Um, then we had a little bit of a gap while we were preparing for the summer. And then the last couple of weeks we've played Fortress Fest, and we did a headline show in Mansfield near about Sheffield. And like you mentioned a couple of days ago, we announced the tour with Abduction coming at the tail end of October. I think there's like one day in November as well. I think 9 days. I think there's 7 or 8 dates. So covering most of the UK. We ended up not hitting Manchester just because Damnation is happening like right at the same time. So it was a little bit fortunate timing there, but I guess we got to do the release show in Manchester, so
Yeah.
sort of take that off for the year, I suppose. But yeah, so that'll be the longest tour that we've done so far. The longest previous runs we've had have only been like, a long weekend here or there, like 3-4 shows. So it'll be great to actually be out for like an extended period of time. We'll be hitting like new places that we've not been to before, like places further south, generally like Plymouth and things. But also going all the way back up to Glasgow, which has always been really great for us. So like the video that we did for Oceans of Fire, that was using live footage from our last Glasgow show. Yeah, I love playing in Glasgow. It's always really rabid crowds, and it's just a great time. So the start of the year was a little bit quieter than last year. Like last year was a lot of almost like sporadic one-off shows here and there, like as often as we could. But we're sort of transitioning to doing more like focused, intentional, like tours in the right places at the right times with the right bands. So we're sort of shifting our energy into being able to have more time writing rather than just being gigging all the time. Because it does sort of, especially when everyone's working real jobs and things, the time to actually write and do that doesn't really exist if you're doing a show every couple of weeks and traveling opposite ends of the country just for the one show. So this year's been a lot more sustainable, really, and productive on the writing front as well.
Right. Are there any plans for any performances abroad?
So it is a big thing that we're aiming to do. There was a couple offers that came in just after we released the album, but they didn't end up working out, just like logistical reasons and things. But it like getting into Europe, especially Germany. So our new label Vendetta is based there. So we're hoping to get into like Germany specifically, and then hopefully branching out from there. So it is on the agenda, and playing in Ireland would be great as well. It's only a short ferry ride over. So yeah, very, very much on the to-do list, but nothing concrete as yet.
All right. Yeah, next question. Tell us a little bit about the history of the band. I understand that it started as a solo project for you, but then you managed to put together a set lineup. So, yeah, I was just wondering what brought you guys together and what you are hoping to achieve with the band.
Yeah, so when I started, it was like the start of the band is a little bit sort of blurry because it was just a case of I got into Emperor when I was like 16, like a little over 10 years ago, and just started, playing I Am the Black Wizards all the time, and then just starting to throw some riffs together, literally like recording it with my phone placed in front of an amp, and like riff ideas on like SoundCloud and stuff, and then I just thought I should make this like give it a name or something. So the start of the project was very much just like I should start organizing these things that I had before it was too much of like a concept, I suppose, because I was like 16, 17. Whereas over the last sort of near 10 years now, it's become a much more like focused and intentionally mapped out concept that occupies a certain place in my head and gives me outlets for particular things. It's not meant to be like an all-encompassing thing. So I started off just literally because I live in like North Wales. No musicians really. That there's not really a live music scene of any sort, let alone like extreme metal. So finding any musicians to play with at all ever was difficult, let alone people that wanted to play this sort of music. So it all started as a solo project, and that's sort of how I wrote the first release, the Morgul Dream, that came out in 2018. By the time that was recorded and released, I'd moved to Lancaster for university, which was where I put together the first lineup, which was Matt Roscoe, who I met as part of like a metal society there. He was predominantly a guitar player, but he agreed to do bass. Good. So he put bass on that record, and he knew a drummer in the local area who we did our first few shows with. Initially, we did have a vocalist who helped do the first couple of live shows because I didn't think I could do guitar and vocals at the same time. Then I decided that I want to, just because it wasn't meeting the quality that I was hoping for. That lineup lasted maybe about a year and a half. Then after that, there was another friend that I met in my time at university who's our current bass player. Started sort of the year that I was leaving. We actually started playing together in a different band first, like thrash band called Insurgency. So I knew that he could learn set lists quickly, and he'd put the work in and be dedicated to it. So we brought him on. There was a little bit of back and forth trying to find like really high quality drummers that are reliable and not already in 5 bands, but we finally managed to do that a couple of years ago. He joined us just a month before our first small tour, and learned the whole set list in like a month and smashed every show. So he's still with us. And a little bit before that, we had our current guitar player join as well. So everyone sort of joined sort of at the tail end of COVID. So it's been the longest running sort of consistent full lineup now. And now that we're starting to write new material after they've learned, so our release in January, again, like I wrote the vast majority of that. Our bassist added on quite a lot of detail to the bass lines, which added like a really nice new element to it. But the like song structures, riffs, like lyrics, all of that was still just like a solo endeavor, really. But now that we've had the time to like learn how to play that record together and everyone's sort of speed on what we're doing, it makes more sense to now invite that sort of more collaborative approach with songwriting, which is very new to me because I've never really done it, but it is at the same time very exciting. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what we come up with.
Yeah, I mean, you touched upon my next question, which was about the songwriting. I mean, the songwriting process for To Bear the Weight of Death took quite a few years, I understand, going through the lockdown period and everything. So this is so now with your consistent lineup, is there a change in the way that you approach songwriting? Is there more of a team effort, or is it something that you still do yourself?
So while we were sort of going through COVID, and I knew that I couldn't release that album, I wrote and released an EP in 2020. That was written in like literally about a week because I wanted to do like really simplistic, like straight to the point stuff. But then after that was done, I did start writing new material in the interim period. So there was probably about 20 to 25 demos at various stages of completion already recorded. But essentially what we're doing now is, now that I have like riff ideas and song structures sort of sketched out, I'm sending those to like our drummer without any drums on, even though I have ideas and I've programmed in what I want to happen, opening it up for the opportunity to, like, I'm not even going to tell them what I was thinking on certain things. I just want to see what he can come up with without being prompted. It may well be the case that only 20% of what he comes up with I want to use, but that 20% can make a song that can be average to really great. So we have got quite a good understanding within the band that we want ideas to come in, but not every idea is going to be used. But obviously, over time, the aim is that as people sort of pick up more intuitively, like what types of things fit together musically, like in the landscape of the band, the level of like things being rejected come down, hopefully, and people will be able to contribute without like second guessing things. So it is a little bit of a balance. I'm not based on the key characteristics of what the sound is. But I need that like fresh input to expand just like the variety and the dynamic of the band, especially. So it is still mostly a case of like initial ideas coming up in isolation, but we're learning how to sort of like bounce ideas off each other in a way that it's not about me having my way. It is about the end result being like the best that it can be. At the moment, it's mainly me that sort of can see that, but like the other people are getting more and more up to speed. With every show that we play together, with every like demo idea that I sent, the understanding is getting more and more intuitive. There's a lot of like unspoken qualities about music that are difficult to articulate to people and explain verbally. It's just a sort of lengthy process of drawing people into it to the level that they can create it themselves.
Yeah, sounds good. So I'll go on to talk a little bit about lyrical themes. So taking from the band's name and the first album, Morgulduin, and it seems like Tolkien and his word has been a big theme in your initial stages. So how did this affect you as a musician and as a person? I mean, Tolkien's work.
I think obviously like black metal and Tolkien stuff is a link that goes like way Wargroth and stuff. There's a lot of that sort of stuff. And back when I was like 17, 18, it was a lot of Wargroth, Emperor. And I never veered into like the like symphonic stuff, like that level of like fantasy black metal, I suppose. But especially at the time, and I live like right near the sea and right near Snowdonia, so there's a lot of like big open landscapes and woodlands and things that evoke that kind of Tolkien imagery. Walking through dark woods and things, and it's very reminiscent of Mirkwood or whatever. So back then, my associations with black metal were a lot of landscape based, like a grand, massive structure. So the work that I pulled from, rather than being like the Hobbit or the Lord of the Rings, it was the Silmarillion, which is encapsulating like the creation elements of it and like more big picture things. So it's on a bigger scale. It seemed more grand to me. And it was also partially just like simply put, like, I was 17, 18. I didn't really have that much of my own life experience to write about in a way that was, evocative and honest. So it seemed like a natural fit. It wasn't a case of like, oh, I can't do anything else. I guess I'll just do this. There was like genuine like passion behind those topics. I wouldn't have written them otherwise. But yeah, as I got older after I wrote that release, I veered away from fantasy things, just because I wanted to have my own personal, like, cathartic outlet for my own life experiences. So our 2020 release was starting to look more like outwardly. So it's called like a sermon in the universal language of suffering. It was all written during the time of COVID. It was focusing on, it's not the nicest time in the world, but the benefits of going through difficult times are pretty plain to see as far as I'm concerned. It forced me to take a good look at like my own lifestyle, like how I'm, treating myself and other people, areas for improvement. Like I wouldn't have done that if everything's just comfortable all the time. Then the album that came out in January, since like 2018, there's just a lot of death in my family, like half a dozen family members, ranging from like 70 years old to 30 years old. So it was like all generations, and they were all very rapid, like sudden illnesses, diagnosis within a week and then death 2 weeks later, or, so it was all really shocking, especially like the most recent one. Like it was a cousin, she was only 32, like 2-year-old kid, and it was just a phone call, cousin's in the hospital the next day gone. So it was all rapid, but I wasn't really able to write about anything else after going through that. But it was a case of after each sort of cycle of grief, you sort of get different things from it. So there was a lot of reworking of lyrics and, like changing particular words to be more accurate to sort of the internal, environment of dealing with that time and time again, rather than just one time. Sort of layers itself in quite peculiar ways, and there's sort of movement forward and then steps back with it. But again, similar to what I was saying before about the benefits of going through difficult times, it's massively increased my appreciation for my own time. And, the people that I do still have around me. So, I can't say like, I'm glad that it happened, obviously. But the fact that it did has made me a much more resilient and caring person, and pretty militant about the way that I spend my time that I have here. I'm very much not interested in putting, half of my energy into things lackadaisically just, for fun.
Yeah.
This is a lot more about fulfillment than having a good time. But at the same time, like it is the main source of enjoyment in my life, I suppose. But it's because that enjoyment is really hard won, and it's, there's a lot of sacrifices that go into getting it. So when you do get the payoff of, like playing Fortress Festival alongside like genuinely some of my favorite bands on the planet, and being able to have discussions with them about how they write their music, how they think about their performances, or just, talking about how cool Judas Priest are, like, all like positive interactions with influential people. That's a fun part of it, but, it's not why I do the band. I would do it like I did do it when we were all in isolation. It's process the world. So yeah, it's a difficult, it's a very difficult band to be in sometimes. You can't live in that space all the time of just constantly confronting grief. So it is nice that there are some positive things that happen after the fact, after you have earned those opportunities.
Yeah, I mean that obviously pretty much answers my next question, because I was going to touch on the lyrics of the latest album, which do seem quite personal, and they do resonate with the listener in terms of it being almost being an emotional support for someone else who obviously lived similar experiences to you, and many did during that time. So yeah, I was going to ask. About the message that you want to convey, but you pretty much answered that as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, just to develop on it a little bit,
mm,
it sounds initially like from what I was saying, it might come across that the album would be very um, negative, but the whole point of the album is not about wallowing in grief; it is about overcoming it. So part of the reason that it took so long to write was because I had to wait for that process to finish almost.
yeah,
So that the first couple songs, I mean, like the first track, when it's closing, it says, I refuse to be forever fallen, I shall bear the weight of death. And, it's a resolute thing that I am going to deal with it. Um, and, throughout the rest of the album, there are certain setbacks that happen. And then towards the end of it, it ends in a much more triumphant place. And that was a very intentional thing. I'm very much not into black metal as whining and like self-defeating. For me, it needs to be a very triumphant thing.
yeah.
Like overcoming yourself and external things. So yeah, it is overall a positive message, I think.
Yeah. Are there any other lyrical themes that you would like to explore in future works?
This is something that I'm sort of working out at the moment. So the way that I tend to write lyrics, it's rarely a case of sitting down in front of a piece of paper in isolation and just I'm going to write lyrics now. It's more like I will be walking or like working on something else or listening to another piece of music, and like fragments of like verses or something will come to me, and I'll note them down without thinking what music they'll go over. Um, when I'm working on demos, I'll come up with working titles that again just intuitively come to me when I'm listening to the work that I'm doing. So lyrics and music sort of get paired up um, at a much later stage. So the general idea is that I'm letting subconscious ideas simmer and then present themselves at the right time. So it is generally a case of it reveals itself to me gradually rather than having a preconceived idea of this song is going to be about this theme.
Yeah.
With the previous album, it was more focused on like I know that I'm writing about death, whereas there's less of like an external life situation that makes it obvious what to write about. But there are a lot of lyrics written already, and there are general sort of themes that are coming through, sort of gradually, like melding together. But it's difficult to put a particular classification on it at the moment. Yeah, it's a difficult one to nail down at the moment. But yeah, that's just due to the nature of how I tend to write things. It tends to be revealed at a later stage to me, but it does end up making sense retrospectively because I can see where I was at certain points in my life, because I'm allowing things to just come through without filtering too much. Actually, like I'll not use lyrics that I don't think work particularly well, but in terms of just the whole idea coming through at once without sitting down and thinking this needs to fit this preconceived idea, I'm able to write really openly and really honestly, and that's massively important to me in black metal. If it's not sincere, I'm not interested.
Yeah. Yeah, let's move on a little bit to the musical influences. And I am hearing a lot of elements from the this atmospheric, dissonant Icelandic scene, like Styrming and perhaps Svartidauði as well, and especially in the second track, Rise or Be Forever Fallen, I am sort of picking up a lot of elements from Mgła, from Poland. So yeah, if you can just talk to us a little bit about these influences that you have for the songs that you're writing, and also if there are any other influences that you'd like to use in the future.
Yeah, I mean, a couple months ago, I got the front and back cover of Revelations of the Red Sword put on my arm. So
Right.
that album is huge for me. Don't think I have like a Flesh Cathedral
Yeah.
poster on the wall. You know, I remember about 6 years ago, I was just scrolling through YouTube, listening to stuff late at night, and saw that album cover, and I clicked on it. And yeah, I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that revolutionized my idea of what black metal can sound like. Um, like it's very difficult to describe. Like it's the atmosphere and that is like palpably just really sinister in a way that a lot of like the second wave stuff was sort of striving for, but wasn't really achieving in my eyes. It's obviously a similar atmosphere, otherwise it wouldn't be black metal release, but it's achieved in a totally different way. So more space in it and long weaving song structures and things. So yes, Farty Dowdy were a huge, massive, new influence. It's even more sort of drawn in on some of the demos I've been writing since. But like you mentioned, there's flashes of it throughout the previous album, little small dissonant flashes of things. So quite a few reviews picked up on like there's a lot of second wave stuff like Emperor, like single note melodies and things, and then combinations of like newer like dissonant passages and things. So that is very much indicative of what my influences generally are, because I still listen to both. Emperor is iconic band that is still holds up. But yeah, you are right in like Icelandic stuff is very much one of my favorite sub scenes within black metal at the moment. I think a lot of that is just down to the intensity in it. So like I mentioned before, I'm not really into black metal that's too soft, I suppose. Like bands like Miss Therming have got a lot of it's like rock and roll intensity about it, and it's not like dancing around the point. It is, there's a lot of heavy metal in there, which I think, especially in the UK, historically was lacking. I'm not into things like Cradle of Filth whatsoever. It doesn't do anything for me. So I'd much rather a band, really punch you in the face with the material. Obviously, like subtlety plays a role in black metal too, but for the most part, there needs to be a bit of force behind things. In terms of like Maguire as well, just melodically, the way that they tend to incorporate, the way that they layer their guitar parts and things was a big influence on me. So there's often like three different guitar parts going on the last record, like rhythm parts and melody parts over the top of it. Yeah, quite a lot of that did come from, records like Exercises in Futility, got a lot of listens, 3-4 years ago. Still from time to time as well. But yeah, Maguire is another of in terms of modern bands, it's definitely up there in terms of quality and influence.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, just I wanted to touch a little bit on the artwork because I have the digipack edition of the CD, and the art is quite amazing. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit about who created it and how do you think it is tied to the lyrical and musical themes of the album?
Yeah, sure. So this was the first release where the artwork wasn't handled by me. So before it was like I'd take photographs and manipulate them. But this time around we had the budget for real artwork, which was it is really important to me. Whenever I think of my favorite records, I think of the artwork as well as so it's important to me that the two tie together. So the artist that we used was Stefan from Chaos Dictator Artwork. He's done loads of like really fantastic covers in the past. You know, they look like oil paintings, and there's so much like texture and detail in it. So we contacted him, and again, is, you know, an extension of letting people contribute more. I didn't want to be too prescriptive in how he does his job, because, you know, he's the visual artist. So rather what I did was I collected like some of his other artworks that are the same like color palettes that I wanted on, like I knew what colors and tones that I wanted. And I sent him all the music and all the lyrics, but I did highlight particular lines that were of particular like importance to me. And then I'd let him come up with how he wants to combine and, you know, symbolically relate those things with each other and how to represent those things. So, you know, like there's lines like, I'll melt your gilded cage in implacable fires of retribution, and with it forge a spear to pierce the heart of comfort. So the character on the front is having his heart pierced by a spear, things like that. So I left it pretty much entirely up to him composition wise. And he sent me a draft, and then there were like some small revisions. You know, I want this to be a bit less like this, more like this, things like that. And you know, he was super accommodating, and he was really appreciative of the. So I told him about the background of the album, what it's about, and he was really appreciative of that detail and the trust in being allowed to work freely on a concept that is really, you know, near and dear to me. So like the working process with him was amazing, and obviously the end result speaks for itself. It's absolutely sensational, and I'm so proud to have it as the cover of that record.
Right, that's good. So yeah, just move on to the final couple of questions. What are your thoughts on the current British metal scene, or more specifically the black metal scene? Yeah, those that.
Um, so like I mentioned before, like historically, bands like Cradle of Filth are not at all what I think of when I think of black metal. You know, I don't want you know, dudes dressing like vampires and dressed in lace and things. It's not about that for me. So in the past, I'm glad that I didn't grow up in that era. You know, obviously there would have been some great tours that I would have liked to see. I would have loved to see Dissection when they came over. But you know, you win some, you lose some. But at the moment, I'd say in the last like, so I started going to black metal shows in 2016. In the last 3 or 4 years, the quality of the bands has skyrocketed. So you know, like you go from playing shows with the same few bands, and you know everyone's sort of starting out, working out what they sound like. And then in the last few years, I mean, like bands like Ninkasag, Abduction, Anti Inferno, Woad, like the jump is absolutely insane. And you know, like I'd like to think that the jump from our last EP to this record has had a similar impact on people. I personally view it as a big leap. You know, the whole concept of bands like that, everyone's got very distinct identities, which I think is quite unique for the UK. Where like when I think of like Polish black metal or Icelandic black metal, there's a general sort of sound that comes to mind. Whereas within the UK, like Abduction and Ninkasag sound nothing like each other. We don't sound anything like Anti Inferno. You know, so it's quite sporadic musically. But I think that's a good thing, especially when you're having like, you know, all day events. You have 5 or 6 bands playing. You still, even when it is like a exclusively black metal billing, you can get a massive variety of bands, and it keeps it fresh and exciting. And no one's chasing the same sound, which I think is a testament to the integrity of the people that are writing this music. It's not a case of, oh, Winterfilleth did pretty good, so let's do a down-tuned atmospheric black metal album and use you know, landscape photos as good. There's very little of that. So you know, black metal tends to weed out the people that want to just chase trends, I think, or I would hope anyway. yeah, it's gotten a lot better, and especially with of course, I'm slightly biased being part of the Reaper roster, but genuinely the quality of the events that they're putting on has massively raised the bar in terms of professionalism in hosting shows. Like bands don't want to put up with being, told all the details like on the day when you've got to travel halfway across the country and you don't know what you're going to get. Like people need to know, where they're staying, where they can, load in from, what the pay is going to be, like not being told when you get there, oh, we've not got, enough people, like we can't pay you the full thing. Like, so the standard in like both the organizational side of things and the quality of the bands themselves in the last like 3-4 years has gone up through the roof. And I think you can see that from the amount of like international interest in these bands. The last few years, the quality of everyone has really jumped up, and it's still, super wide ranging musically, and yeah, I mean, I think another great component of it is that the bands that are particularly doing well, they're very often like trying to support other bands that are still coming up, and like help them out where they can, and it's not like people pulling the ladder up behind them, and it's very much the opposite. You know, I'm probably, so I'm only 26 at the moment, so I'm maybe like 5-6 years younger than some of the bands that we're playing shows with at the moment. They're regularly like, offering like, snippets of advice here or there, helping like, facilitating introductions with labels and things like that. So it is very much a positive, healthy competition. It is a case of, people will see one band doing well and think, well, we need to step it up with this next release. But it is very much an attitude of like a rising tide lifts all ships, which I think is pretty plain to see with a lot of like, whole day black metal events, like filling out venues like Rebellion in Manchester with like only UK bands. Whereas a few years ago, I'd go and see Marduk there and it's, not completely sold out. So to have sold out shows with exclusively UK bands, like it's a big deal. Even though we're not like capping those bills ourselves, but the fact that, bands like Nick Hassag and Abduction can be high up on a bill like that and fill out 400 capacity venue is a testament to how much it's increased, which is, it is something to be proud of, and I'm really glad to be able to contribute my part to that.
Yeah, that's also the feeling I'm getting here. I see a lot of live performances going on, and I'm happy to see that, to be honest. And I was probably in that Marduk live as well a few years ago. Yeah, so just the one little note here. Rise or be forever fallen. What would be apostrophe?
So when I was writing the lyrics for that record, I was reading Paradise Lost by John Milton. Not specifically like looking for lyrical inspiration, but in terms of like the language used, it's like, really grandiose, like old-fashioned English. So that came from that. So yeah, there's some like archaic language sort of sprinkled throughout, and that is one of them. So yeah, that's where that comes from. Paradise Lost.
Right. All right. So finally, I would like to thank you very much for taking the time to do this interview. It's been a pleasure getting in touch with you, and I do hope to see you in one of the future live events. And yeah, if you have any final comments or any messages you'd like to send, just feel free to do so.
Yeah, no worries. But yeah, thank you for taking the time too. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for making the time in the middle of the day. But yeah, I do appreciate it. And thank you for picking up a CD as well. Like it genuinely means the world to me when people support what I do and resonate with it and, want to dig deeper into things. So sincerely, thank you.
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna start recording. Let's see.